Welcome, everyone, to this Scrabbleverse Newsmaker interview. I'm your host, Josh Greenway. I'm the person behind Scrabbleverse.com, and I'm very excited today to be interviewing John Shreve and Steve Pellinen. Thanks very much, everyone, for joining me, whether you're watching on letsplayscrabble.com/live or on Josh Sokol's Twitch channel. So thanks, everyone. I just wanted to quickly, in case anyone doesn't know what Scrabbleverse.com is, I thought I'd give a quick plug before we started the interview. Scrabbleverse.com is a platform where you can see new Scrabble content every day. It's a free platform. You have to sign up to be a part of it, but you see free content every day, and you can it's a digital place to hang out with other Scrabble fans. So if you're looking for puzzles, word of the day, memes, interviews, articles, study tips, all that kind of content related stuff around competitive or tournament Scrabble, check out Scrabbleverse.com. It's meant to be a unified platform for all of Scrabble that is not tied to any particular organization or lexicon. It's truly designed to be a place where Scrabblers of all levels, the Scrabble fans of all levels can come together and learn more about competitive Scrabble. So with that said, I would like to welcome my very special guests, John Shreve and Steve Pellinen. John and Steve, if you guys could join me here, fantastic. Welcome to the show. Hello.
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 Very good. I'm going to give everyone a very brief overview of who you two gentlemen are, and then I'm going to ask you to add to that introduction. So first of all, John Shreve has been a high-end expert player for over 35 years. He is the president and CEO of MCG, which is a company that helps healthcare organizations implement informed care strategies. And also joining us is Steve Pellinen, who has been an expert player for over 40 years and is the current president of WGPO, the Word Game Players Association. What we are, well, let's do this. Welcome, guys. And I'm going to ask John, I'm going to ask you first. Can you just tell us a little bit about how Scrabble fits into your life today?
All right, sure. Well, obviously for the past 2 years, not very much, but since my first tournament in 1985, on and off, I have more on than off. I've been a regular tournament player, regular club player, and enjoy it. I guess I'll say the other fun thing is at my company, MCG, from time to time we'll have events in which I'm taking on 6 teams of 3 people each, going around the room, and that's sort of become a fun event that we have at the company. So it's worked its way into my work area as well.
That sounds awesome. The real question is, because it sounds like you're the boss at work, does anybody come up with the win, or are you undefeated in those battles against the teams of up 6?
Oh, it's when the teams do beat me, it's cause for great celebration, and I think it's happened about 3 times out of, I don't know, 60 or 70.
Fantastic. Steve, I'd like to welcome you as well. And can you tell us a little bit about how Scrabble fits into your life these days?
Yeah, more than I thought it would be at this point, given recent happenings. But yeah, I played my first tournament in 1978. It was an unsanctioned, unrated type of thing. And then in 1980, I played my first rated tournament. So from then on, it's been a pretty big part of my life. I've been a director. I've been involved with various committees and whatnot, and every Scrabble association that there has been. So I've been a part of all of that, and it's obviously played a big part in my life. My wife is a better Scrabble player than me. Most of you know her, Lisa Odom. And So, we have Scrabble at home, we have Scrabble on trips, we've done, pretty much done it all from the Scrabble standpoint.
Fantastic.
I've been involved
sorry.
with leadership at WGPO for the past 11 years, and that's an ongoing thing. We may want to just offer ourselves to Scrabbleverse, and you can take over everything, and we can enjoy it from there.
Well, I would say Scrabbleverse is more about content than actual sanctioned play, but thanks for the plug. So let's talk a little bit about WGPO, or sometimes it's referred to, or as I know it as, WGPO. I don't know if that's cool or not, but that's always how I've heard it. But I wanted to explain, just in case anybody's watching this broadcast, I would find it surprising if they don't know about WGPO. But for those that don't, a little over 10 years ago, when competitive Scrabble in North America, there was a decision by Hasbro to end support for the National Scrabble Association. That happened in 2009, and that's when NASPA originally was created in 2009. But shortly thereafter, the Word Game Players Association was created as kind of a breakaway or a splinter organization made up of players who were unsatisfied with NASPA's governance. That's my kind of general. I'm happy to hear any corrections on that. But since that time, WGPO has continued their mission of play often, play fair, and have fun, running tournaments, running the annual Word Cup. And just in case people aren't aware of WGPO, I wanted to give them that sense. And I'd be happy, Steve, if you want to add anything to my description or correct the record there.
No, that's a pretty good summary. When WGPO first started, the idea was just to show that there is an alternative way for a players organization to operate and do more or less the same things that were happening in NASPA, and with the idea that they would see the light and come our way, and everything would go away. I mean, there would just be NASPA at that point if it became more of a players association. Didn't happen, and we went through many years and basically come to the place that we're at now. So things are about to change again, I think.
Absolutely. So I think that's an excellent point to talk about where we are, kind of current state, and then we'll get into the kind of the meat and potatoes questions here, guys. So about a month ago, it was announced publicly that, John, you intended to donate $100,000 per year to WGPO or to WGPO if certain benchmarks could be achieved. And in your comments in particular, you talked about one of the phrases that really struck me was it is up to all of us to reinvigorate the Scrabble world. So what I wanted to know is, number one, everybody's quite excited about this financial commitment. But what I would like to know is, where do we stand today? Has WGPO achieved the standards that, John, you set out in your initial letter? And just where do we stand? Are we waiting for pieces to fall into place, or are we there already? I'll direct that. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me say one thing, and then I'll let Steve answer the rest of it. But so it's more the IRS rules that we're waiting on than it is any particular benchmark or something that WGPO needs to meet. So from a foundation, so we have the Family Foundation, which we can talk about. For us to make contributions from the Family Foundation, the recipient needs to be certain types of nonprofit, 501c3 in particular. And so when I sort of offered this donation from our foundation, I said, but you have to meet the IRS standard.
Very good. And Steve, can you tell us where we are in that process of meeting those standards?
Yes, we have successfully incorporated as a Minnesota corporation. You have to incorporate in the state. And every state has somewhat different process for that, but we did it here in Minnesota, and we've been working with our attorney on getting the application ready for the IRS to, accomplish or meet their standards for 501c3 status, tax-exempt status. And we're at the verge of getting that off to them. So probably within the next week or two, that'll be out. And then it takes time that we have no control over.
Understood. Here's what I'd like to ask. So, John, can you give us a sense? I'd like you to talk about your motivations for like how you came to this decision. Maybe you can give us a little background on that. I think that would be helpful for everyone.
Yeah, so I think, and I'll tell you on and off over the years, I've thought about whether this would be something that we could do, and it was about a year ago I initially approached WGPO with this offer, and they've been working on it for a while. But it really is, as I look over the arc of Scrabble since I've been playing, it does feel like we've declined somewhat over the years. And I think when I think about that, I think there's two major things going on. One is an external environment that's just changing, what people are interested in. Probably technology itself is causing people to think less about board games. So just, it's the nature of where we're at. And then I think the second thing is sort of the fighting that's gone on within Scrabble has not helped either, right? So to some part of it we've done to ourselves. So my hope is to, like you quoted me, reinvigorate Scrabble to get it going back again. And in thinking about it, I thought this might be a good way to get it going.
Very good. I'd like to actually follow up, John. Steve, stand by. I'd like to follow up. Can you tell us a little bit about the source of these funds? This is a family charitable fund. I believe it's a 501c3. If you could just tell us a little bit about that, because I'm sure people are curious.
So it's a family foundation. So our family, has this foundation that has been going for almost 10 years. Its other contributions are maybe less whimsical maybe than this one. One of the favorite ones that we're working on is there's a doctor in Iowa who has well, first off, my wife has MS. This doctor has MS and figured out that the traditional treatments for MS were not working all that well, and dug in and started doing her own research and really got to a place that's much more diet-based than it is medication-based. But, the medical community doesn't accept that easily. And so what our foundation is doing is funding clinical trials to help her prove out that this is indeed a good intervention. So the foundation has a number of places that we donate, but that's an example of something that we do.
Absolutely. And I think that's, I think a lot of people are I certainly find that really interesting. I'm sure a lot of people are, that being in a position to help different causes. And I would also mention one of the interesting things about 501c3s is you can look up past financial reports and all that stuff. It looks like, and being in Scrabble, you start looking up these 501c3s every once in a while because you want to see what's happening with money. So I thought it was interesting that this represents what seemed to me like a pretty significant chunk of funds for your organization, at least based on the last reported year, I believe the fund gave away somewhere between 1.5 and 2 million. So this is not a tiny drop in the bucket for this charitable fund. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And it's, and it's reflective of, in effect, the hope that, like I said, we can get the Scrabble community stronger again. So, and that's important to me. And I hope, by the way, that as we progress in this, that others will kick in, not necessarily with money, but with effort and so forth to help get us there, because I think it's worth all of our while to do so.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And thanks for kind of going deep there on some of the funding. Steve, I'd like to bring you back in now. How do you feel, this kind of funding is pretty significant given the size of WGPO. Can you talk a little bit about what your expectations are kind of going forward, or maybe just even stuff that you're excited about? Kind of, if you can share a little bit about that, I'm sure people would love to hear.
Sure. Just a little bit of a disclaimer here at the beginning. I have Parkinson's disease, and at times it interferes with my speech. So if I have to, step aside or take a drink of water or just stop for a bit, that's why it's happening. So sometimes Absolutely. It just doesn't roll smoothly. Well, I think almost anybody could imagine what it felt like to get John's letter. We just thought, huh? This is game changing. This is something totally different. We haven't had anything like this in Scrabble before. It actually brought me back to the 90s when there was a lot of discussion in the mid 90s about how could we get Scrabble to become more prominent, and publicized and televised, and the whole thing. It didn't go very far, and didn't get very far at the time. And at the time, I thought that this is the very sort of thing that John's doing here is the kind of thing that was needed. There needed to be some source of funding, some source of capital that allowed us to try things, to do things, to maybe even make a few mistakes or something before we get on the right track. But at least to have something that allowed us to, as a volunteer organization with all kinds of people doing other things besides playing Scrabble, to advance it. My own personal hopes for Scrabble over the years, well, probably for almost anybody, it hasn't panned out, in the sense that I think from a vision standpoint, I would like to see Scrabble become a mind sport that's even if not as many people are involved, it would have the same level of activity that the U.S. Tennis Association or U.S. Golf Association or poker tours, or things like that. That there would be a kind of a pro-am approach to it, where the top players in the game have a way to if not earn a living, come close to it doing that, and then there would be the recreational and amateur players that continue to play for fun and follow the players that are on the pro tour. But that sort of thing is my personal view, and probably a few others too, but it's the sort of thing that becomes possible with a donation like John's. When you start actually trying to put that down in ways that it would get used specifically, you find out that even $100,000 doesn't go all that far, but it's a start. And I would like to see that others that are in a position similar to John's maybe could up the ante and kind of put that in to help us to move in that direction. I'm kind of with all the different controversies that pop up from time to time with respect to not just organizations, but certainly the Lexicon issues are popping up all the time now. Those things seem, we get bogged down. We get bogged down in things that really aren't as important as the game itself. Whether or not there's another 200 or 400 words in a particular lexicon is to me a very minor issue, even though I'm strongly anti-expurgation from the standpoint of moving the game forward and moving the organized Scrabble game forward, I think that should not be an issue. And I'm not necessarily the best one to argue that with people, but I think, it's the sort of thing that gets hashed out. And I think we should be able to eventually agree on something that, this is important for the future of the game. This isn't quite so important.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And we are going to, just for everybody watching, we are going to touch more deeply on Lexicon. I have a few more questions about just procedurally where we are with WGPO. So I'm going to continue down that path, but we're certainly going to talk about Lexicon. But thank you for that answer.
Well, I think I got off track. What was your original question?
My original question is, what are you excited about, and how do you see this changing things? So now I want to get a little more specific. And also, I prepared some questions for you guys, but we're already getting some questions in the comments. Please, if you're watching and you have questions, throw them in. We're going to do a Q&A at the end. We're going to get to as many questions as possible. So please, questions into the comments. And if you're watching on Josh Sokol's stream, you can throw them in Twitch chat over there, and he will shoot them to me. So here's the question that I have, and I'm going to direct this first to you, John, but I'd like you both to weigh in. In the original announcement, there was some mention of increased prize pools and potential seeding of other tournaments. I know from reading Scrabble Facebook that a lot of these decisions aren't completely made yet, that there are elections coming up and an elected group is going to make final decisions. But I did find it interesting or noteworthy that larger prize pools were mentioned in the announcement. So, John, my first question is to you. What are your thoughts about how increased prize pools may help in growing the game of Scrabble? And just where do you see increased prize pools on kind of a priority level for what's important about growing the game?
Yeah. So increased prize pools was the thing I thought of first when I was thinking about this this overall contribution. And my thought in thinking of it first is that gets people's attention and gets people more interested potentially in competing. Where we have some top players who've probably moved on to other games where there's more money available. So if there is money available, that you might get some of the competitions that we had before among top players and bigger tournaments and so forth. I thought of it in terms of both bigger prizes in the World Cup, as well as potentially picking out particular tournaments to add some, so some of the other tournaments during the course of the year. And while I started there, I think there's plenty of ways to think about, if your end goal is growing the game, are there other things that would work better? And I'm, I've sort of said the donations with the intent probably of increasing prize funds, and I'm also not, directing WGPO as to what to do.
So that's not a mandate. That was sort of your first impression.
That's right.
Okay. And Steve, same question to you. What is the role of big prizes in terms of growing a Scrabble organization and a Scrabble community, and where do you see it?
Yeah, and just so people know, we do stay in touch with John, and we feel a need to touch base with him fairly often on some of the ideas that are being thrown out there, just to know what he's comfortable with on this. So, but that's kind of been our starting point too, because of the initial statement on it. Increasing prize funds is definitely a big part of what we probably want to accomplish with that, but we also want to do what's best for growing the game, for bringing new players in. I could easily see us being involved in some type of school or youth program where new players are coming into the system all the time. That's that's one other possibility. We are trying to be careful not to we don't want to commit any of John's funds to the ordinary expenses of running the organization. So we still have our ordinary, expenses and fundraising and things like that to take care of most of what goes on there. Going forward on the long haul, again, that's another thing that we try to keep in mind. This is not just a one-shot thing. John is committing this to, an annual sort of thing. So we may try some things that don't work so well at first. Or we may, try something different in another year. But this year it's basically what are we going to have left? Next year actually. What time are we going to have left after the IRS is done with us?
Right.
And then we can be much more specific and definite about things.
Yeah, I wanted to ask one more question that bring a couple of threads together here now that we've talked about prizes and funding. So, and this is a question I'd love to hear from both of you on. With the funding and working with the IRS, question should go to John first. John, you originally laid out that you wanted to see WGPO as a 501c3. I'm just curious if that 501c3 is achieved and they have a tax-exempt status. I guess the question for me is that makes this donation more possible somehow because of the tax-exempt status. And then would increasing prizes, is there any potential conflict with kind of tax-exempt fundraising, what you would consider kind of almost charitable fundraising, and increasing prizes? And I'm not trying to catch anyone. I'm literally just curious about that.
Yeah. So I have not consulted any lawyer about that question.
Okay.
I think with WGPO as a game to sort of WGPO as an organization to promote, overall, I think they've picked their words more carefully, but the overall status of the game and just of literacy in general, I think one way of achieving that is calling more attention to these things and do that by prize funds. I personally don't see a conflict there. And like I said, I haven't talked to a lawyer about it.
Very good. Steve, do you have something to add there?
Well, just to clarify, tax exempt status, all nonprofit corporations are tax exempt from paying taxes. The 501c3 is the one classification that allows donors to deduct their contributions from their own taxes, which helps at times, but isn't such a big deal anymore with some of the recent tax law changes. So, but it's still there for people that it does matter to. We also have a number of things that are complicating life from a business or a corporation standpoint. Various tax returns, various types of withholdings that have to happen when people win big prizes. We have to be aware of all of that, and we're getting up to speed on most of that as time goes on here.
Okay, I want to move to my next question, which is really comes down to what kind of organization is WGPO going to be? How is it going to change? We've seen, I picked up on this topic. I think there were a few people commenting on Facebook on this particular issue, that WGPO plus this level of financial commitment has the potential to kind of change the nature of the organization. I think some people, one of the things that people like about WGPO is sort of the scrappy kind of underdog identity. And so I was just wondering if we could talk about that. And just, I'll add one more thing. From my perspective, I feel like WGPO in the past has been kind of defined almost by not being NASPA or being a more democratic version of NASPA. And just me personally, I have to imagine that definition is going to change. So Steve, I'd love for you to talk about this particular issue, the change in the character of the organization that's coming, just sort of what your thoughts on that are, and anything you have to say on that would be great.
Okay. Well, WGPO has always been defined by the people that are part of it. The members of WGPO make us who we are, and that's not going to change. Some of the directions and some of the activities, some of the priorities can change, but that's all still going to be done under the same process that we've always done it, which is through discussion, debate, yelling and screaming at times, other times just, saying, well, yeah, this is the best that we can do for, this particular situation. It's the way democracy works, which is messy, slow, and not always easy to take. But this, John's contribution puts us in a situation that no organization has had to deal with before. So we're learning as we go. We're trying to figure out how best to apply this and not, have it make us somehow have to be a totally different organization. I think there's always, in my mind, I'm always looking for kind of a both and type of solution rather than an either or when it comes to many things, including lexicons. WGPO is primarily a TWL oriented organization, and maybe 10% of its members are Collins oriented. Now, if we look 10 years on down the road, it's hard for me to see that that's going to be the case. There's probably always going to be a place for the TWL game within WGPO, but the world of Scrabble is Collins. And for us to fit into that, or if we want to fit into that, we're going to have to do some changes along those lines, at least. It's, again, it might take us a year, it might take us 2 or 3 years, but at some point, it's going to have to put focus in that direction or point us in that direction if we're going to be part of the overall world Scrabble scene, which, in today's technical society with the way you can communicate and participate in games with anybody all around the world, that's the only way to go, I think. We aren't going to be able to unite the world in TWL Scrabble. At the same time, I don't want members of our organization to think that that's ever going to have to go away. If there's interest there, we find a way to do it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that answer. And I just want to say, I really enjoyed your answer when I said it's always kind of been defined by not being NASPA, and you said it's always been defined by its members. I thought that was an excellent answer. John, do you have anything? To add to this topic?
Yeah. And so I'd say, why did I support WGPO? Because of its democratic principles, and that's how I feel we can build Scrabble up, as opposed to some other form. So while there's necessary changes to the organization, I'm not expecting the nature of WGPO to change.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. And John, I have a follow-up for you. You mentioned there was a quote in the announcement. I think it was from your original outreach. So we've already talked, that was a while ago, but I'm just going to read this quote. You said, "I had thought before of WGPO as an alternative, but I am now thinking that WGPO should attempt to take a leading place in this space." So I wanted to bring up that quote, and I wanted to ask you, do you, how do you contextualize this move? Do you think this has the potential to, I don't know, how do you see, how about this? How do you see WGPO and NASPA coexisting going forward, or based on your words here, that WGPO should attempt to take a leading place in this space? Do you see it as a competitive thing? That's what I'm curious.
Yeah, and probably, with thought, since I wrote that down, I still think, getting the good, strong democratic principles out front is very important. I also, like I said, with thought, have gotten to a place that says it's not good for Scrabble over the long term to have competing organizations. So I don't think it's doing it through battle, which maybe has been historically where it's been. It's doing it through finding a way to come together and figure out, and I would say the most important thing in getting together is sort of that democratic side, and that's and yeah, and I'm not trying to um, win. I'm trying to, well, let's say it differently. I'm not trying to win for WGPO. I'm trying to win for Scrabble.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that. So let's, just because Steve has mentioned it a couple of times, let's move to Lexicon, because they're just in the last 24 hours, again on Scrabble Facebook out there, we've seen a lot of discussion. So as most, or as a lot of people know, I'm sure almost everyone watching this knows, that recently WGPO voted to, depends, the words that you use here is always touchy, but voted to keep slurs and other offensive terms in the dictionary, as opposed to what other organizations did, which was follow essentially the license holders down the road of removing these slurs and offensive terms. Now, my understanding, and I have not read the email, but apparently there's a new proposal with an upcoming vote on whether to reverse that decision for Collins with the latest dictionary update going to CSW 21. That's where I understand. Steve, if you can fill us in a little bit as to kind of what's happening, and if you can contextualize a little bit of kind of where the debate points are online, I think that might help our discussion here.
Sure. Yeah, and for the 2 or 3 friends and cousins of mine that are watching this that have no connection with Scrabble, this probably sounds like one of the stupidest, silliest debates to be having, but it's not for Scrabble players. Well, first of all, just to clarify, the vote that WGPO took a while back to maintain the existing lexicon was for the TWL. It had nothing to do with Collins.
Thank you.
We were required by our bylaws at the time to take that vote because that was our official lexicon, and if we were changing it, it had to be done at the vote of the membership. Collins was not an official lexicon for us, so in that sense, it's a new thing now. We're coming because we're involved with both lexicons, and we need to establish which way we're going to go in connection with the rest of the world. That's why we're voting on that.
And if I can just cut in for a second, my understanding is I've seen a couple of references to offering a Collins division at Word Cup with a WESPA rating, and potentially a guaranteed prize pool has been discussed. Did that go out as communication from you guys, or am I? Go ahead.
Mike Johnson is the head director of the Word Cup this year.
Love Mike.
Yep, Linda Finn and I are assisting in that, and Winter, who we all know, had already donated $1,000 to the prize fund for this year's Word Cup, or next year's Word Cup. So we think that with kind of the expected number of attendees that we would have at that we'd be able to at least have that much for that. It has nothing to do with John's contribution or donation at this stage. If John's donation becomes available to us in time, then everything's going to change. We would probably be changing the prize fund, all the way up and down the line for both TWL and Collins. We're in the process of actually working with the Collins Coalition to see if there's a way for us to kind of combine and put the Collins end of things together with their help. That's kind of in the starting early stages of planning, and we have things to work out, but we're trying to see if that can go. Will Anderson has approached us with some possibilities there, which I can't say too much about at this point, but that would be exciting if that works out. But again, it depends on the outcome of this vote. So it's something, because there's not much time left between now and next summer for planning something like this. So we need to have decisions made in a timely and fairly rapid manner to be able to continue to go on in the direction that we are going.
Very good. That's helpful. Thank you for that. So, John, one question that this is going to seem like a tangent. We're going to continue to talk about Lexicon. I'm just curious, do you have a history of playing in WGPO tournaments?
Yes. Oh yeah, absolutely. No, so both I've played in a number of World Cups and other local tournaments that are sponsored by WGPO and NASPA. I've played in both.
Of course.
And a number of years back, sort of early on in some of the battles, the directors in Colorado were all kicked out of NASPA, and so Colorado became a WGPO state, kind of not by their choice. And so all the local tournaments I played in are all WGPO as well.
Got it. Thank you for that. I know that was a bit of a distraction from the Lexicon issue, but it just struck me that was a question I wanted to hear the answer to. Let's talk about, how about this? We'll start with John on this one and then go to Steve. John, I guess my question would be, should there be any difference between NWL, TWL, not sure what to call it, and CSW when it comes to expurgation issues? It sounds like we may be in a situation where WGPO has one versus the other. I don't know. I haven't heard you, John, talk about Lexicon before, so I'm just curious whether you have general thoughts on that and the potential inconsistency.
Yeah. So there's lots of layers to that one. So I'll start with, while Steve is very gung-ho on Collins, and I think a lot of top players are, when I talk to other players, they're not, right? So when he says a year or two, I don't see anything happening that fast. So I think there'll be two lexicons for a while. Just reading of the landscape, not a strong opinion on it. In terms of, where should we be in removing slurs? My personal opinion is that the removal that was done at NASPA was over the top, meaning we're removing a lot of words that man on the street would not view as offensive, right? So it just sort of, and I kind of think, is there 20 or 40 words that if we took out, a lot of the noise would disappear? And I'd kind of like to be at that as where that'd be my favorite endpoint. I doubt that's where it'll end, but that'd be my favorite endpoint. And I kind of do agree with Steve in terms of a silly debate, because in the end, the dictionary is just the rule book by which we play Scrabble, and if you change it a little bit, we can adapt. So whatever we end up, the actual list we play with becomes less important. The interesting thing right now is, since I play both WGPO and NASPA, I need to know the slurs down cold, because those are the ones that are good one place and bad the other place. So I have more focus on them than I would have ever had before. Now, what should happen in Collins? I don't have as much of a vision into there. I know part of the direction of Collins is, let's be able to play with the rest of the world. And so it seems like it's more of a worldwide discussion than it is a national discussion, and probably should go along with that. And I don't know what conclusion that leads to, because I'm not paying enough attention to that.
All right, thanks for that. Steve, I'd like to ask the question to you just from a slightly different perspective. Can you talk about the pros and cons of being unique in your lexicon, having a different lexicon than other organizations, whether we're talking about North America or the world? Like, can you talk about maybe some of the cons there, and whether you see some pros as well?
Well, I mean, in terms of major tournaments, for example, they would be driven by numbers of players, numbers of attendees, numbers like dollars that are part of it, if there's sponsorship, if there's that kind of thing. So it's kind of well, it's a mystery. I think what happens is that we have we have, like I said, we have about 10% Collins players in WGPO and 90% TWL players. That's not going to change quickly or soon, and I don't have any intention or desire to try to force people to go in one direction that they're not wanting to go. It's something that players need to choose for themselves and have a good reason for going one way or the other. To the extent that we have a steady or large population of NWL players, it's always going to be a factor in terms of how we plan tournaments and pay out prizes and that sort of thing. So, again, that's kind of my both and type of approach to things. I'm going to be looking for ways to allow, both lexicons to exist and to satisfy and keep players happy in whichever direction they're going. Again, it has to do with long-term vision. I don't see the NWL moving outside of North America, but it could remain strong if there's enough players that continue to want to use that for whatever reason. Some of that would have to do with the youth programs and what they're going to be starting with and what they'll be using. So that's that's still something to be determined.
Okay. And what I'd like to ask, let's see here. I wanted to ask a follow-up, but I may have just lost it. So let's talk about something else. Apologies, guys. Let's move on to, thanks very much for the discussion on Lexicon. I know that that's something that people are curious about. I'm getting a few questions for you guys. So we're getting close to Q&A, everybody. So please, if you can throw questions into the chat. And thank you, Linda, I see your comment that it's very complimentary. Oh, I know. There you go. I stalled until I remembered my question. Steve, I want to ask you one last thing that has to do with Lexicon. You mentioned the possibility of working with Coco. That's the first time I've heard anything like that. So I'm just curious. Are you talking about a partnership? Are you talking about two organizations working beside each other? Or is it just too early, unknown? Just anything you can tell me there, just because I'm very curious.
Well, when Coco first formed, we were in contact with each other at the time because they were splitting off from NASPA and were going through some of the same things that WGPO had gone through years earlier. So there was discussion and stuff, and we've been supportive of each other as organizations since then. We haven't collaborated on any tournaments or anything yet, but we thought, well, this might be one that would be a good one to try. So yeah, there's nothing definite yet that I can say about that other than that we're trying, we're looking into it.
Very good. Well, just for me, I think that's really interesting and creative and stuff like that. I think the Coco team, especially if you've never visited Coco's website, they do a heck of a job with their kind of digital presence. So just kudos to those guys. So let's now move on to elections. There are elections coming up. We are in a period of nominations right now. Some of what is going to become the elected board is filled with some existing members for the first year for kind of a transitionary period. Steve, can you give us a little bit nuts and bolts? What's happening with the elections and the nominations?
We're in the middle of the accepting nominations right now, up until November 27. Anybody that wants to apply for or become a candidate for one of our 3 open board positions, they have until that time to do so. They also have members in general have until that time to actually join WGPO to be able to vote in the election. So anybody and I certainly invite, the more the merrier when it comes to a number of members. WGPO has about roughly 1,000 members right now, which actually surprised us because we were going through the membership rolls and trying to clean everything up and get current emails and get everybody up to speed with things so we could send out ballots to everybody that's supposed to be getting them. So that was actually a few hundred more than we thought we had at that point. So that's good, but we can use more. We need more players, we need more directors, we need more help in almost everything that we're doing. So to the extent that things get bogged down because of the lack of people that are interested in doing things, that's just the way it goes. But we're hoping that there's going to be people that are excited to get involved and help make WGPO their organization and point it in the direction that they want it to go.
Great. And John, do you have anything to mention when it comes to these elections? Are you taking kind of a hands-off approach, or a hands-on approach? Like, can you tell me a little bit?
I am totally to the side as elections occur. I'm not, and I have no intended influence at all.
Gotcha. You're Switzerland. You just want to play, right? That's where you're at.
That's right.
You don't want to be on the decision-making board.
That's right. I've occasionally attended the open forum nights at Word Cup. That's the closest I've gotten to this.
Gotcha. And Steve, has anyone? So my understanding is the intention is to have a 7-person board. 4 people from the previous executive committee, board of representatives, are now on that board as a transitionary period. Then we're going to open up 3, and then a year from now, there'll be 4 new elections. Do I kind of have that right?
Yes, the way the bylaws are set up, we are staggering the terms of the directors. They're 2-year terms always, and we're staggering them so that, 1 year 4 are going to get elected, another year 3 are going to get elected.
Okay, thank you for that. And at this point, has anyone declared that they're running for these spots, or is it we're still in the nomination process, so nothing is public?
Yeah, we're still in the nomination process. There are several people that have expressed, one level of interest or another, but the candidates themselves are going to be submitted. Whoever is part of that they're going to be submitting candidate statements that anybody will be able to read on the WGPO website. But I don't think there's anything there yet.
Okay, very good. I'd like to talk just briefly about Word Cup 10, which I believe is scheduled for July 9th to 13th, 2022 in Chicago, where either one of you, I'm sure Steve maybe has we'll throw this to Steve first, and then I'll ask you a question, John. Where do we stand on Word Cup 10?
We've renewed the contract 4 times. We started out there in 2019, 2020, well, no, actually 2020, and then 2021 will be the first time. We really hope it'll be the first time that the pandemic is far enough behind us where we can do something like that. So we've had arrangements with this particular venue for 2 or 3 years. Recently, we were just able to negotiate additional playing space because of our, new situation that we're in. Wanting to be able to accommodate more players. It's still going to be, we aren't going to be able to fit 800, but we can fit, 250, something like that. So we're hoping that we can draw something in that neighborhood for that tournament.
Very good. John, do you have, sorry, Steve, to cut in there, but John, do you have plans to attend Word Cup 10?
Yes.
No. Very good.
I've done the past, I don't know how many in a row, but yeah, I've been a regular attendee of Word Cup.
Very good. I think for me, the date is going to be the question. As one of the co-organizers of the annual July 4 tournament, the fact that Word Cup is starting on July 9 makes it a little bit tight, makes our job as individual directors a little tougher, but I guess that's the summer for you. And obviously there have been scheduling issues with championships in the past. Steve, anything to say about just scheduling and just everything that comes along with it?
Yeah, no, that's kind of it. We every summer there's been 2 or 3 major tournaments that are happening, and we are also at the mercy of what is available to us in particular locations at the time. So sometimes we have lots of flexibility where we can avoid conflicts. Other times it's only 1 week that's available, and if it conflicts with something else, then that's too bad. But it's either do that or not have it. But to the best we can, we've always tried to avoid conflicts with the other major events, especially doing them on the same week. There's been a few times when things have been back to back, and a lot of players like that. If they have the time and money to be able to afford to go to both big events, then that's a fun experience.
For sure. Let's
currently on my calendar to go to both this summer. So
Oh, very good. Nice. Both, wait a minute, both July 4 and
No,
World Cup?
not
No,
yours,
the
sorry.
two championships. All right.
The two championships.
Just checking. I wanted to see if I could get you registered, John. Okay. I've got a few questions from people. We're going to go right to Q&A. So please, if you have questions, throw them into the chat. We're coming close to the end of the broadcast. So here's a question for John. I'm sorry, I think these are questions from Twitch, so I don't have the credit for who asked the question. Josh Sokol, if you could help me out with that, that would be great, or just let your guys know. But to John, what in your mind are the most important needs in tournament Scrabble that need to be addressed?
Yeah, so my endpoint is how do we get more players there, right? So how do we get the competitive scene up a notch from where it is, and there's probably lots of sub things under that help you build that up, and I think it's partially one of like I've thought the prize money, but I think it's also sort of reducing some of the noise around issues that aren't as critical to Scrabble itself, and maybe more either competing organizations or lexicons or whatever. And so we have to get beyond those and get the game for the game's sake. Let's put it that way.
Very good. I'm gonna flip these back and forth. So Steve, let's go to a different question for you. I know you mentioned youth play, but this question is specifically about the younger generation of players. So any thoughts off the top of your head? I know, like you said, you mentioned, I think, school Scrabble and youth Scrabble, but I think this person may be looking at younger generation in terms of digital efforts, digital play, stuff like that. Any thoughts there?
Well, yeah, if we're talking the under 40 crowd, let's say, that's, at least for me, relative to me, that's the younger generation. And I would love to see more and more of those players getting involved with WGPO, because WGPO is getting older, and we need younger players. We need the energy, the imagination, the the commitment that they have to the game. We really want that to be part of who we are. I've always, several times over the years, I've made a plea to one or the other of them and said, well, if that's what you want to have happen, join WGPO and make it happen. It takes work, it takes time, it takes, steps forward and steps backward, but that's the way we work, the way we operate, and we become who we are, in terms of the membership.
Very good. John, I'm going to flip this question to you. Someone basically said, look, we haven't heard that much about where the money is going to go. So John, if you could just give us in a nutshell what the plan is, elections, that board is going to, I imagine that's what your answer is, but can you just give us that in a nutshell because someone asked?
Yeah, so my contribution is to WGPO with suggestions, but not requirements of how they spend the money. So I am not saying that, there are, from a foundation, you can make donations that are for a specific cause, and we're not doing that from the foundation right now. So that means the WGPO board and or whatever input they're using from the members in general will make that decision. And like I said, I suggested prize funds, and I'm not saying it has to be that.
Got it. So, and there was another question. Again, I don't think we have defined answers, but I want to get the question because someone sent it in. This question is from Adam Henderson. He says, how much would the expected top prizes be if John's donation is available for World Cup? So I'm going to change the question just a little bit because you guys aren't going to give me a final number. How about this as a question for both of you? What's a really good Scrabble prize? What's a really good top prize for a new World Cup? What do you think moves the meter?
You want me first on that, or?
I'll
Go
take
for
either
it.
one of you. Just feel free to jump in.
10,000 is a nice top prize for a top division.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, we could keep things really simple and take all 100,000 and say that's, you know, winner take all. That wouldn't be that exciting for, you know, 99.9% of the players. So we aren't going to do that. But
Yeah, I think, yeah, so the sexy prize is a big one at the top. The one that drives participation might not be that.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. There are just a couple more questions, a couple more from Twitch. So I'd like to hear from both of you on this, just because this is a topic close to my heart when it comes to live streaming. So I love that someone asked this question. They said, up until this point, Word Cup has never had a broadcast, a live streamed broadcast. So any hope of ever getting a stream or some media content for Word Cup?
yes, I mean, we're working with Will Anderson, talking with him, and, you know, he's one of our biggest advocates and you know, creators of content for that sort of thing. So we, you know, we are in talks with them. There's nothing definite, and it depends on lexicon choices and things like that. You know, there's so many things that are possible that we can't answer for sure at this point. You know, there are things that you know, maybe are a one-time decision that we have to make for this tournament, or instead of, you know, permanent going forward. But there's just ways that we have to try to figure out how to make this as successful as we can make it for everybody.
For sure. One question that I had that maybe, and I've got, I think, one more question after this, but one question that I had, this is a thing that has come up over time, and I'm just wondering, Steve, I imagine you've answered this question before, so I'm going to ask you. And I don't want to presuppose anything. I'm just going to tell you kind of what I have heard. So my understanding is that for some of the infrastructure that WGPO has, whether we're talking rules, lexicon, software, things like that, I think some people have been critical of WGPO that they use other organizations' tools. Do you have any kind of response to someone saying something like that?
Sure. It's, you know, all of us in both WGPO and NASPA came from, well, except for new players, came from the NSA, and we were all part of the structure, the infrastructure of the NSA, and moving on into the other organizations. So a lot of us were involved for and responsible for you know, things like the rules and the lexicon, the word list, and that sort of thing. We several times had, well, maybe only a couple of times, I guess, at this point, had tried to suggest working together with NASPA in terms of committee work, especially on things like rules and lexicon, because they affect both organizations and whatnot. So, but apart from that, you know, the use of the rules and the lexicon from NASPA, I mean, a lot of probably half of our players practically are also members of NASPA, which complicates things. But it also, you know, it also just means that, you know, they have access and are encouraged to use those resources too.
Got it. Okay, I'm going to ask this question to John first. We got a question from someone, and then I have a specific follow-up for Steve. But we got a question from Twitch again about that there are a lot of club players out there who do not access tournaments because of distance and cost. How do we go about reaching club players? And do you have any, I'll ask John first, do you have any thoughts on sort of clubs versus tournaments in general and specific to growing the game?
I'm not sure I have any deep thoughts there. I think, you know, clubs kind of the weekly familiar connections that you can make with other Scrabble players. And if anything, people come to clubs for a while and then graduate to tournaments. And sometimes those tournaments, you know, if they're non-locally, that can be a problem. So to me, the best thing for that is more local tournaments. But that requires people to volunteer to run them. So it's so to the extent that that works out, that's great. And I'm not sure if there's a way WGPO could help that situation along or not. I haven't thought about that.
Gotcha. And Steve, as a follow-up to that, specifically on clubs, my understanding is there are some clubs that used to be affiliated with NASPA that have recently made the move to WGPO. Is that correct? And is that something that you guys do any kind of encouragement, or you're just kind of saying, hey, come on over if anybody's interested? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Calgary Club in particular is one that made a recent move to WGPO, largely based on the Lexicon choice, I think, from my understanding. But you know, we aren't out there, you know, seeking that sort of thing. It's just that we are available if people want to do that. It's, you know, again, we're not trying to ruffle feathers or you know, raise other issues on that sort of competitive nature between organizations. I think it's just got to be something that's done from the local level. I mean, tournaments are the public face of Scrabble in terms of what the world sees and what generates the most news and activity. But clubs and local clubs and local tournaments, that's kind of the heart and soul of any organization. And you know, that's where we have to be you know, attending to the needs of that. So yeah, that's another place that we intend to stay on top of.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think clubs are a really important part of customer acquisition for these types of organizations. We did have a question about would helping to fund at the club tournament level be possible? I imagine you guys are looking at all possibilities at this point, right? Nothing's
it's not nothing's ruled out on that.
Okay. We also had another question about perhaps, like, I'm going to frame this question up this way, Steve, for you. Obviously, you mentioned earlier today ordinary expenses and those expenses not being paid by this donation. And you mentioned fundraising efforts. So for what you termed ordinary expenses, that's covered by member fundraising. Is that the idea?
Fundraising and just, you know, donations as a part of that. You know, I mean, we've always had very, very generous people. It's never been a large budget for us. You know, our annual budget has been in the neighborhood of $5,000 or $6,000 a year. So that we're not talking a huge number there. And specifically for the World Cup, the budget goes, you know, is isolated from the rest of the expenses. But we've always been able to give out 100% or more of player entry fees in prizes because we have that strong fundraising history, and have been able to cover all of the expenses of the tournament that way.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things, because one of the questions we have is perhaps WGPO could provide incentives, bracket monetary, to direct tournaments. But I would say that certainly doesn't fit with what it sounds like how things have gone in the past. This has really been volunteer and people pitching in, right, to make this happen.
Correct.
So what do you think about that question, a monetary incentive for directors to run events?
You mean paying them to direct the tournament?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a possibility. It's not out of the question. I'm not going to rule anything like that out. I was the recipient of a couple of paychecks from NASPA for working at the Nationals, you know, a couple of years. So it's nice to have if you can afford it and can do it. But whether that again is best use of the funds for growing the game and drawing new players in, it's going to be part of the equation.
Yeah, it does feel to me like starting to pay directors would be a way to use up the money fast.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm going to go to the last question. I really want to thank everybody for submitting questions. I think we got some really great questions there. The last question that I have for you is, let's say anybody here watching has been a NASPA player their entire existence. They may be aware that other organizations exist, but they've never really sought that information out. They've never played in another organization's tournaments. What do you think is, I don't know, what is your message to players like that? Well, I want to give you guys the floor to people who just aren't familiar with WGPO. I'm happy to take Steve first and then John, but I'd love to hear kind of final thoughts on what you would say to a player like that.
Well, I am one of those players. I've maintained my NASPA membership all the way through for the most part. So like I said, I've been involved with the formation of both organizations too. So I know them pretty well from inside and out and from top to bottom, but the actual experience of playing a tournament is very similar in both organizations. There's not, that was intentional on WGPO's part to make it possible for players to go back and forth and not have to learn a new lexicon, not have to learn a new set of rules, not have to, to play to totally different standards. So they're practically the same. The only difference between the organizations that's significant in my mind is the governance issue. They're completely different in that, and that's always been the sticking point for getting the organizations to actually come together on things. From a player standpoint, there's virtually no difference. I mean, we've had that from many people that WGPO and NASPA tournaments are very similar.
Very good. John, do you have anything to add to that question? What you would say to a player who never really considered WGPO?
Yeah. So sort of two parts there. So the first part is when I talk to NASPA players who never play in WGPO events, I'd say the underlying thing I hear is more of, it's sort of, I don't know how to characterize it best, but it's sort of, well, this is the official one over here, so I might as well stick with the official one, right? So kind of dismissing WGPO as a splinter, but not really thinking about it. So I think the players that are in NASPA and insist on NASPA only, there are some who just say whichever one's available, I'll do. But for the ones that insist on NASPA, I think it's more of what's official. And I hope with some time here, people can consider that there's a good infrastructure behind WGPO as well to support that. I'll disagree with Steve a little bit in terms of the player experience. So playing the game at either tournament, it's the same. I totally agree with that. The environment that you're in, and I've heard this from multiple people, like at World Cups, is it's much more of a community feel for the tournament overall than it is at some of the NASPA events, and you have that at both places. That community is at both places, obviously, but I heard that as comments at more than one WGPO event, that people like the overall feel of that. So I think there is. So I think the official difference is the governance. The unofficial difference is how that flows down to how people are feeling about it, helping fundraise for it. So for a typical World Cup, for people who haven't been there, has a big table of things that people have donated for silent auction to raise the money and so forth. And there's just sort of that activity going on at the same time. So there is a stronger feeling of community, I would say.
Gotcha. Well, thanks very much, gentlemen. Any final thoughts from you two? Otherwise, we're going to wrap this up. You guys good? Steve, anything?
Well, I probably have more thoughts now than I did at the beginning, but I welcome people to, ask questions, contact us, find out what's going on, keep up, come on over and join us and be a part of it. That's what I'd like to see.
Very good.
Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, in the end, we don't want an organization to win. We want the Scrabble community to win.
Very good. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time today to answer these questions. I think we had a really good discussion. I want to thank the audience for sticking with us for over an hour here. And if you like Scrabble content in general, if you like going deep on these kind of competitive Scrabble issues, I want to encourage everybody to check out Scrabbleverse.com. It's the place where you can see free Scrabble content every single day. And I also want to encourage people, if they want to go to a great Scrabble event, I think World Cup 10 is a really good one. But also, if you're hankering for a little bit earlier, I also want to give people a shout out that the New Year's tournament in Albany, New York is going to be a lot of fun too. So thanks very much, gentlemen. Thanks, audience. Thanks, Josh Sokol and that community over there on Twitch. And hopefully we'll see you all again. Thanks, guys. Everybody wants to give it a wave. We'll head at it.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks for hosting us, Josh.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Here we go.